Hey there, Ramp Up community. I am so excited today to be talking with Daniel Abasolo. He's going to talk to us about how to get started if you don't already have an LLC or some other business formation. He's going to give us some tips on how to get that process started, and when to know the right time to pull the trigger and go ahead and start a business. So Daniel, if you want to kick us off here just with introducing yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are, and what kind of clients you help.
Yeah, my name is Daniel Boslow. I am a associate attorney at Springer and Lyle in Denton, Texas. I represent a lot of businesses and a lot of families. That's the entirety of my practice: family law and business law. I sort of on the business side focus on startups, especially startups in the tech world. But I've represented all sorts of businesses in entity formation, in financing, in transactional contracts and stuff like that, and also in litigation, unfortunately. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
That's awesome. So in this community, we have kind of a mix of people. Some people are established businesses that are just looking at ways to get their business online, try to do more digital or things that they can still do while we're in this kind of crazy lockdown status. But other people in the group have always had, or for a while, they've had this business idea, and now they see this as a great opportunity to get started. So let's kick things off here talking about, if someone is in that position of they don't have a business established yet, but they have a great idea and they're ready to start selling something online. What should step one be? Can they just dive in and set up a PayPal account and start taking payments, or is there something that they need to do first to keep themselves protected, and to make sure that they're doing everything properly?
Well, there isn't a perfect step-by-step order. I can tell you, though, that filing an entity makes a lot of sense from a record keeping and liability standpoint for your taxes, for your accounting, and from protecting your own personal estate from the liability that starting a business can create. And it's a pretty quick process, really. You can certainly contact me. A lot of times I will refer people back to themselves if all they have is a single member LLC. I turn away a lot of business because I don't want people to bill me for something that they can handle themselves. And most people can get an LLC formed and running within a week or two. And I'm quite sure the Secretary of State is still processing entity formation transactions of all kinds. You could certainly do it this week. There's a filing fee associated. There are some requirements. We can talk about all that. But it makes sense to get started early. If you want to accept payments before you file, there's some things to be aware of. I would say the first thing is sales tax. You are going to be liable to state comptroller for good old sales tax. You want to keep some of that held back. You want to ask for that 8.25% if you're subject to that tax, and you want to save that so you can pay that comptroller, because you don't want a problem with them. I promise you, they're still doing business in spite of the pandemic too. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if it's something that, say you're selling donuts or something, I don't know, something that nobody's ever going to want a refund with, and there is no serious liability or need to sort of go back to that transaction in the future, it's not so much a big deal then. But if you're trying to sign a contract for some sort of long-term business that you're intending to provide for somebody, certain things like whether you have real plans to form an entity start to become important, and then what you call this entity starts to become important. So one of the first questions I get from people is, I want to call my business whatever it may be. I don't know. Is that name available? And there's ways to check on whether that name is available. But you have trademark considerations there, and then you have just sort of typical contract considerations there. You're trying to make a contract with an entity that doesn't yet exist. Is that going to become a problem for enforcing the contract later? So if you're going to do that, you want to make sure the name you're picking to do business under can be secured legally in terms of intellectual property law and just with the Secretary of State in general, so that your contract is enforceable and clear in the future.
And what are some ways that people can do that? So if they have an idea of a business name that they love or something they
Mhm.
want to use, where can they go to find out if that's even available?
Yeah, well, let me do share screen real quick. I hope this works. Can you see this?
Not yet. There's a share icon at the bottom of the Zoom window.
Uh, ah,
There we go.
how about now?
There it is.
There it is. All right. I'm a new Zoom user. So here I am on the Texas Secretary of State website. This is just kind of the forms landing page.
Okay.
Minimize this thing and drag it out of the way a little. Let me see here.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to see your screen if it's got the video over it.
Yeah, I'll try to make it as big as I can. Um, see which tab it is. Here we go. I think it's this one, not this one. Name filings. All right, so here's just the business services. I'm gonna go to name filings. And the best way, there's two ways you can check whether your name is available. You can get on what's called SOS Direct, this little guy up here, and that's the Secretary of State's direct filing portal. So you can pay per transaction, which includes a search, and you can then file your certificates, amendments, whatever it may be that you need to file with Secretary of State or conduct whatever searches. But a simpler way to do it is to just call this phone number. And there is a nice human being that will answer eventually. You know, when you call matters, like any phone number, try to call them at a time where they might be available, not at the end of the day or right at the beginning. But if you call that number, you can just ask them if your name's available or not. Now, whether a name is available or not does not guarantee it's a good idea to use. It might be that nobody's incorporated Google Inc. in the state of Texas, but that would be a bad idea, even if that name is available. Because they
Right.
just tell you if it's been filed before, they don't tell you if it violates some trademark. So that's a thing to consider too.
Okay. So kind of use a little common sense and make sure that it's not already taken.
Yeah, and then with names, a lot of people think they need to play this big entity shell game. You generally don't. And they think they need to, like, if they're going to have a website that does X and a website that does Y, they need to both be separate entities for some reason. And that can be true. But a lot of times with names, if your product is real obvious or it's clearly taken, you know, like, I don't know, Austin Grocers or something like that, some sort of name that associated with a place and is just general and obviously going to be taken. You can file a much more specific name, you know, with just a random list of numbers and letters, .inc or LLC or whatever it may be, and then you can get what's called a DBA, doing business as,
Hmm.
and you can get that with the Secretary of State or with the relevant county, and just do business as a different name in that county if there isn't a way to protect that name or to file your entity as that name with the state.
Oh. And so a DBA is just much more lenient on.
Yeah, they're $10 at the county clerk, and as long as nobody else took it in Denton County, there you go.
Okay. That's awesome.
And if it's just a countywide business, that makes some sense. There's ones for the Secretary of State too that would cover statewide.
Hmm.
There's Texas trademarks, and if you're doing interstate business, there's of course the U.S. Patent Trademark Office and all their various requirements. That's not something I would tell you to try yourself. It's
Okay.
out there if you're trying to have a big fancy website or app that needs to be protected.
Nice. And so for people that are out of state, I would imagine most states probably have a similar type of setup where you can
Mhm.
go to the website and find what you need or find that phone number.
Yeah, every state wants it to be easy for you to start a business and to be an entrepreneur. So generally, this is pretty quick. I have a buddy in Colorado that's filed a few of these, and theirs is $50 and it's instant. Here it takes a few days to come back, and it costs $300 for most entities. So it could even be better than Texas, but Texas isn't so bad.
Okay. And so does it make more sense to just go directly through like a website like this for your state, or is there any value in using like a LegalZoom type of service?
So as you might imagine, I have not used LegalZoom
Okay.
personally. It would be malpractice. But I would like to think that LegalZoom offers a portal that just does this for a fee. I use a thing called, let's see, I'll just show you, Legal Inc. I don't know if this is available to normal folks, but I would say this is the one to go to if you just want to file your entity documents. But LegalZoom would have it too. They, for a fee, will walk it all through, even walk it through expedited. They will provide you with a really crappy form operating agreement. They will even put it all together in a somewhat nice looking book with a stamp and send it all to you that way, if that's what you want. And they will also offer registered agent services, which we can talk about too. So I often use them just for simplicity's sake. Most of my clients are not just a solo or somebody freelancing that wants to just spin up an LLC. Most of those people I tell to do it themselves because I don't want to waste their money.
Right.
So if it is that, I would probably say, find some sort of online vendor that does it, or just try it yourself using the good old Secretary of State website. I promise you that's going to save you the most money.
Okay.
Doing it this way. And there's guidance on all of it. And honestly, if you're all brand new to this, it's useful stuff to know. The guidance is not made to be impossible. It'll tell you where you need to ask an attorney questions if you don't have the answers. My first recommendation as somebody that researches the law is to do a bit of that research yourself, because it's freely available online and it's relevant to your livelihood if you're thinking about starting a business.
That's awesome. And at what point does it make sense to consult an attorney like yourself? So obviously not if you're just, I'm going to start selling, some sort of one-off product out of my home, but when does it make sense to consult an attorney at the very beginning of the process?
Well, I do free consults. There's some lawyers that are in tall buildings that don't, but I'm still happy to do free consults and hear from people. So if you think you might need an attorney, give me a call or give someone like me a call. And for the most part, we're happy to hear from you, even if we're just going to tell you to, save a buck and do it yourself. It makes the most sense to hire an attorney when you're taking on employees, when you're taking on a significant transaction contract that is going to be a big part of your business, and you're not intimately familiar with that type of contract and the type of terms you're going to see using and used against you. Anything involving real estate, anything involving a partnership. I could go on and on. Financing, certainly financing. Maybe there's like an SBA loan, you can handle that. Certain bank loans, those are what we would call contracts of adhesion. I can tell you what those terms in that big contract mean, but you're stuck with them no matter what they mean. You're not going to get them to change their mind about that stuff. So if you're taking on private financing of some sort, like you've got an individual that wants to invest in your company, it's certainly time to consult with an attorney. Any sort of venture capital investing. And then also those things you need to be aware of the SEC federal law about regulation of securities and investment. Those things are relevant. You can't just go out there soliciting equity and investments and not be subject to the federal government's regulations of securities. So that's a thing to consider too. Another sort of middle ground between calling Daniel the lawyer and just doing it yourself, and what I often recommend is to consult a CPA. So your taxes are about to get a lot more complicated. The way you need to keep track of your finances, your accounting, your bookkeeping, that's all about to get a lot more complicated. A CPA can file an entity for you, and a lot of times I will tell people, just, you're going to need a CPA anyway. They can file this for you. Why not just go to them?
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then over at Stoke, I know Wallace, is that it? Those guys are really good for spinning up an entity. And they'll, if it's just you and you're just you need to freelance because the Rona hit hard and you got laid off, but you can still do some freelance business. That would probably be where I'd send a lot of people that know they're going to have business to do and need to get a system in place quickly. I'd probably send them to them. if it's
Mhm.
just going to be a solo freelancer.
Okay, perfect. And I guess in those cases, does it still make sense for them to even file an LLC, or if they're just going to be doing contract work, can they do that without filing anything?
Yeah, it does make a lot of sense to file an LLC. So there's two reasons you file for any kind of entity. There's liability protection, and then there's taxes. And if you're going to employ somebody, certainly you would need to
Right.
file an LLC. And you want to have that ability if it becomes relevant to whatever you're doing. So it's better to have that in place than not, but also just taxes. So I guess we can talk a little bit about the types of entities one might file here.
Yes, yeah, because I know I'm an LLC. I know a little bit about other
Mhm.
entities, but I think a high level look at what are some of the different entities and why would you want to go one way or the other.
Yeah,
So,
let's just use the old Secretary of State website and see if we can't find something here to talk about. Selecting a business structure. See, it's all free. It's all around.
oh, nice.
So, if you just start taking money to provide goods and services, you are a sole proprietor. Whether you like it or not, you're a sole proprietor.
Okay.
This means that you are individually liable for any debts or torts your business gets into. You're liable for all its contracts, for all its stuff.
It sounds a little scary.
Sounds a little scary,
Maybe
but for
don't
most
just
people,
leave
it's
it
really
at that.
not. I mean, if you're just, let's say you're selling ducks like decoy ducks or whatever those are that hunters
Oh,
use
yeah.
at the farmers market. You can be a sole proprietor. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
There's no liability involved in that. There's just really nothing to worry about. You can be a
Right.
sole proprietor. You probably shouldn't spend the money on an entity. So there's a certain level of like simple transactions, simple businesses that just aren't conceivably going to have liability. That sole proprietorship's fine. General partnership. So this is another thing that can happen to you, whether you like it or not, like a sole proprietorship. A partnership is just two or more individuals or entities that are sharing, profits and losses, revenue and costs in a business of some sort. You don't have to have a partnership agreement. You can become a partnership by virtue of you just doing that with somebody. You can get stuck being a partnership. So partnerships are some of the most legally fraught, some of the best ways that I get paid are partnerships, because they're people get into them with the best of intentions,
Hmm.
on a handshake and all that stuff. Everybody expects that everybody's gonna, be a word is my bond kind of thing, and we're gonna all do what we say we're gonna do, and we're all gonna try hard, and we're gonna understand how we're gonna share our profits, and nobody's worried about what happens if things change, if a major life event happens, if a pandemic sweeps in. Nobody thinks about that stuff until it's too late. And then when it's too late, it becomes sort of like a business divorce. We use that term a lot in business law, that this is like a business divorce. People that were previously on good terms are now having a bitter and emotional separation of their business interests together. And that happens in partnership a lot. So if you're doing some sort of essential business activity with anybody else, you should really have a written agreement about that. So there's two big, because you can get stuck without a written agreement. There is a partnership agreement that you're subject to. It's just codified in the business organizations code, and whether or not you're aware of its terms, those terms apply to you if you want to stop being partners. And you may not even realize when that's happening, and all it takes is somebody to file a lawsuit, and then here's all this stuff that you weren't aware was actually governing your business relationship, and it was all the time. So partnership that's definitely one you want to consult an attorney early and off and on.
Hmm.
Make sure you're not messing something up. I would say in terms of the types of entities there are, generally it's broken down into partnerships and companies, right? Corporations, LLCs, and partnerships. Those are the two important distinctions. A partnership and the way the liability is handled between them is very different. So In a general partnership, just like in a sole proprietorship, each partner is individually liable for all the debts, all the obligations of the partnership. So that's not ideal, but oftentimes we're talking about partnerships of two business entities, so it doesn't really flow back to the individuals involved. It stops at the entities. Two corporations can be partners in something or have a partnership for some reason. But generally speaking, a general partner, there'll always be a general partner. That entity or individual is liable for all the debts of the corporation, all the obligations of the company. In corporations and LLCs, you have, I'll just use the corporate model since that's most familiar. You have shareholders that hold the equity in the company. You have officers and directors that manage the company, and they manage it for the benefit of the shareholders, and nobody's liable for nobody's individually liable anyway for the debts and obligations of the business. An LLC is like a simplified version of a corporation. It restricts the number of shareholders. Everything's called different things, different names, but instead of shareholders and officers and directors, you have members and managers. Limited liability company can be member managed or manager managed. So if there's only one member and you want to say you're a manager, that's fine. Or you want to say you're member managed, that's fine too. But if there's multiple members, you need to probably have a manager, and that manager will make the important business decisions for the company, subject to a bunch of rules spelled out when it's formed. And then as sort of a hybrid between partnerships and corporations, there's limited partnerships or limited liability partnerships. Those used to be legally distinct, but over the years they've sort of just merged to where they're basically the same thing. And so a limited partnership will have one general partner at least and a multiple number of limited partners. The general partner quite often is an entity itself, so nobody's getting that individual liability. And that general partner will make the important decisions, management decisions for the company for the benefit of all the limited partners, and there'll be an agreement about how profits are split or costs are split between everybody. And so all the limited partners enjoy liability protection from the company's debts and obligations, and the general partner is exposed. So that is a common feature in certain investment structures. It's a common entity, and say you're going to do real estate investment. That's often how that's set up. A lot of venture capital funds are set up that way too. So there'll be a general partner, and that is like an entity that does the analysis and figuring out what investments are worth what, and then it brings on limited partners with very limited rights to decide what gets invested in or not. Maybe they have a vote, but that's about it. And then that's where the money is, and there's not much money in the limited partners or in the general partner, but he's making all the decisions about who gets to pitch to the partnership. Okay. Real estate, similar deal. You've got limited partners that are trying to basically invest in real estate that the general partner is attempting to manage and develop. And then there's professional organizations. There's a professional corporation, there's a PLLC, and there's and LLPs are one of the older traditional forms of professional entity where doctors and lawyers will be LLPs often, though you don't have to be, but often they are. And the state will require everybody that's a partner or a member or a shareholder in one of these professional corporations to have whatever relevant license it is, whether that's a bar card or your MD or whatever CPAs do. Okay. So that's sort of a high-level picture of all of the entities available. And then there's a whole world of nonprofits too.
Well, we won't go into that.
Yeah.
Nonprofits are, I'm sure, a whole separate beast unto themselves. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So what else do people need to know if they're just getting started, they're ready to get their business going? Is there anything else that people need to be aware of, or just maybe some things that most people don't think about before they start collecting money?
Yeah, so I just highlighted S corporation. Both LLCs and corporations are eligible to make the S election. Let's talk about taxes for a minute. Generally, what's desirable about an LLC or a corporation is that not only does it protect you from liability, it offers certain tax advantages. Partnerships do this too. Any of these entities do this. They allow you to file business profits and losses on your personal return. But then there's also the matter of self-employment tax and how that exactly will work. A corporation does not, like a classic corporation, does not have individuals filing its profit losses on the individual's tax returns. That's its own entity that files its own taxes. An LLC does what's called pass-through taxation, so do partnerships, and they allow you to file the profits and losses on your own tax returns, Schedule C. So a corporation is subject to what's called double taxation because of that. So the profits on the corporation are taxed at one rate, and then it pays out dividends to individuals, and those are taxed at their own rate too, at the, whatever the individual's tax rate is. And these are all things you should talk to a CPA about. But at a big picture wise, a corporation double taxation. That's generally bad for a simple freelancer. You want to avoid that.
Right.
LLCs and partnerships, you put them on your own Schedule C, and that's considered better. And then for a LLC or a corporation, you can elect to do what's called the S election on your IRS form. So the S election, and this has gotten better with the Trump tax cuts a few years back, allows you to hire yourself, air quotes, as a employee of your own company. So what you do is when you make an S election, you say that there's going to be you're going to hire yourself at a reasonable rate, whatever that it means, to do the thing you already do. And then anything on top of what you make, you can pay yourself sort of like a dividend and pay a lower amount. So let's say I'm an attorney and make $150,000 a year, right? I'm not saying that's how much I make, but let's say I made that much on average. Some months are good, some months are bad, but at the end of the year, I seem to be making about 150. Well, what maybe I can do is file an LLC and be my own, a PLLC for an attorney, but whatever, be my own employer, and then I can say I'm going to pay myself a salary of $100,000, and I'm going to take $50,000 as a bonus, so to speak, on top of my salary. And I'm going to pay a lower tax rate on that bonus than I am on my salary. And that's generally a big tax savings, and most people want to do that. And you want to talk to a CPA about that little tax hustle. It sounds like a hustle, but it's actually quite common, really. People do it all the time.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Daniel, I really appreciate your time today. I think this is awesome information for anyone that's starting a business, or maybe they've been doing some freelance or selling some products on the side and they've just never stopped to take the time to do this step. Anything else you want to mention before we wrap up?
I will mention that you can always call me or email me. My again, Springer and Lyle. If you just Google that, you'll find my firm. Our office number is 940-387-0404. We've got somebody there answering phones this week. Maybe only one person in the office, but I'm generally reachable through my office, and I'm available on social media most of the time. I have a Twitter and a Facebook and an Instagram. DF Abasolo, Daniel Abasolo. You'll find me one of those ways. So I'm happy to answer any of your questions or help you out. I would say best of luck, get started. If you've got some idea that can survive this, we need good ideas right now.
Awesome. Thanks again so much.
Thank you.